As always, we are delighted to have Pavle Sabic with us right now. He's the Director of Credit Market Development and Thought Leadership with S&P Capital IQ. Thank you, Pavle, for coming today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your company and what your role is.
Okay, very briefly, we're one of the foremost providers of data and analytics globally to the financial markets, institutional investors, banks, corporates, and you name it. And our information is used within my team to create research and thought leadership that help our clients make efficiencies within their workflows.
Okay, so the 13F filings just came out. Now, what does this mean for defaults? What are you seeing?
So, the 13F filings, we're looking at equities mainly, but sometimes you can glean different things from it. 13F filings came out. Healthcare was very hot last quarter, but this quarter, hedge funds are selling out of that. It's a lot to do with Activis and AbbVie. They're the kind of top two sellouts that we're seeing this time around. But financials are very strong. So financials have actually been invested a lot by the top hedge funds, and we're looking at kind of the biggest hedge fund by equity assets. It's this report that we call the hedge fund tracker. And if we take the financials and the positivity there, we look into the default markets, we're actually seeing that financials are one of they don't have the lowest defaults in 2014.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
And what do you predict as far as the future for the rest of 2015 going into 2016?
It depends. I mean, there's a lot going to be resting on the shoulders of energy, right? Everybody's looking at energy right now. But if you look at the kind of default rates, if you look at, let's say, leverage loans, for example, leverage loans usually they have floor at 1.02 on average percent. LIBOR right now is 0.26, 0.23, around about there. So there's not much risk of that kind of happening. And once energy future holding, which defaulted recently, once that gets backed out of the 12-year lagging default loans, then that's actually going to drop. So, it's last 10 years, this is the period with the least amount of defaults that we've actually seen.
You were on a panel earlier today. What's hot, what's not? What is hot? What areas are hot? What areas are not? And as far as distressed investing, what are you seeing? What are you excited about right now?
Right now, I'm doing a lot of work, and we're looking closely at the GT Advanced Technologies with Apple. They defaulted, so we're kind of decomposing that, if you like. Same sort of thing as the Japanese did with American cars, and then they're putting them back together to make Mitsubishis. We're trying to do that with GT Advanced to see kind of almost telltale signs of what's going to happen in the future. But in terms of defaults, industrials had a year with quite a lot of defaults. Consumer discretionary has always had quite a high year and quite a lot of numbers of defaults. So we're kind of looking at specific kind of subsectors there, catalog retail that has quite high elevated probabilities of default. So yeah, churning through a lot of data.
And how are the trends different in the US versus the rest of the world right now, globally, Europe?
One thing we apply is actually a country risk model onto a lot of the companies that we look at in terms of their defaults. And what we're seeing is, emerging markets, Brazil is having quite a bit of a tough time. Europe, of course, with what's going on with Greece, there's a lot of attention being paid there. While as US, it's kind of out of recession. It's employment is increasing. It's doing rather well. So you have to apply these different telltale kind of signs to discover where all the information is.
Well, you're certainly the gentleman in the know. I should have mentioned at the onset that you're an author, and you have another book that's going to be coming out in March. Tell us about that.
Well, unfortunately, it's not a whole book, but it's going to be a fairly substantial report, if you like. And it's fascinating because it's on sports. It's actually on the kind of credit quality, financial quality of some of the largest football teams, and for me that means soccer, of course, right?
So not American football.
Yes, exactly, not American football. So soccer teams, and it's as simple as this. I'm taking very sophisticated models that we use for corporations, and then applying them to the biggest clubs to see how profitable they are, to see what their chances of probability of default is, and to see what they're like as business, how efficient they are.
And when you're gathering the information on this, are these teams pretty transparent with providing information to you?
Yeah, it's a very good point. So the reason that we're not doing American football is because they're exactly the opposite of that. They're not transparent at all. The European teams more so, Latin American less. But we have, I'm looking at around about 99 to 100 teams within Europe and Latin America. And some of the biggest teams in the world, like Real Madrid, their revenues are 766 million, but that's nothing compared to like a Walmart or a Tesco. However, their popularity and the amount of supporters and fans they have is huge.
Crazy, yeah.
Exactly. So the investors are going into these clubs, but the chances of default are quite high, and it's usually the investor that suffers, not the fans that goes and has their, their pint while they're watching the game.
Very true. Well, I will look forward to that coming out, and as always, wonderful to see you, Pavle. Thank you so much for joining us on M&A.
Pleasure to be here.